My grandfather and his uncle were the
Hmm.
pioneers in being the first Indian owned business to export black pepper from India to break the British monopoly between McDonald's and KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, Domino's. The biggest differentiator and the biggest plus point, I would say, frankly, of the international chains is that their supply chain management and SOPs absolutely ensure a phenomenal consistency of the customer experience. The innovation approach of the Indian entrepreneurs is much, much faster and much
Yeah.
more open. Piri piri of McDonald's in West and South is made by VKL seasonings.
Wow.
Nothing comes close to the piri piri experience for an Indian consumer.
So, good morning and welcome to yet another edition of Thinkly Talks. Joining us today is Mr. Ajay Vanivara, the visionary behind VKL Spices, Food Service India, and Nutriti Ingredients. Ajay has revolutionized the food solution industry with his innovative approach to seasoning, Horeca solutions, and specialty ingredients. Let's explore his remarkable journey and insights. So, welcome to the talk, Ajay. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, Vivek. Thanks a lot.
Ajay, it'd be great. So, if you could just kind of just walk us through, your journey. What really motivated you to enter the food industry? Because I'm sure you would have a lot of options when you started off. And was there any particular reason how this all panned out the way it did?
Sure. Well, I come from, first of all, a family of multi generation entrepreneurs.
Right.
I'm, in fact, the fourth generation in the family, which is, and I'm not just the only entrepreneur. We are multiple cousins and brothers. My older brother is an entrepreneur, younger brother is an entrepreneur. At
Mhm.
least two other cousins are entrepreneurs. They're all known in the industry. So
Right.
it's in the DNA, literally. I mean, it could not be more DNA oriented than this in our case. So that is one part. I think the second part of it has to do with spices. Our Mariwala is, as you know, is black pepper connected with black pepper, and historically, my grandfather and his uncle were the
Hmm.
pioneers in being the first Indian owned business to export black pepper from India to break the British monopoly, and they were the first ones to do it. So I think. There is a tradition therefore of spices and commodity. It's That was another part of it. We have typically been closely associated as a family in terms of known for food in general, but that I guess most Indians would be like that. And last but not the least, I think I spent many years studying in the US, and so there was quite a bit of exposure to processed foods there, and including to processed foods as well as food services. So that is also at the back of the mind as things started to develop. So I would think it is a combination of entrepreneurship, spices, and the exposure that I had as a student, as well as food being a core part of our ethos in the family. And I personally, frankly, believe that in India, for all Indians, you or me or anybody third person, it's God, mother, and food are the three most important things for every Indian. So that's the really the background. There's nothing more to it. I'm personally not a great cook. My father and my wife are both gourmet cooks, in fact, but I'm not. So
So
that's pretty much it. Yeah.
I love your line, God, mother, and food. I mean, that pretty much defines the Indian culture in
Yeah.
that sense, right? Could you kind of share us the story behind the inception of VKL Spices, FSIPL, and of course the Nutriti ingredients? I mean, how did they come about, and do these business kind of work on different adjacent markets? Do they complement each other?
Correct. Yes. No, you're absolutely right, and you hit the nail on the head about adjacencies. That's a core of at least our the way I've pursued the business, and in the family also. Generally speaking, in our extended family too, we have not jumped off. Other than my younger brother, who's went off into the automobile business. Typically, all of us have gone from morphed from one business to another in adjacencies, rather than just going off into something completely tangentially. So the bad news is that we've not ended up with very cutting edge, high technology areas in that sense. I would say, but we've been more, I would say, solid in the form of looking at adjacencies. Having said that, our evolution was VKL Spices was originally Vallabhdas Kanji Limited, which is named after my grandfather and his uncle, and that was a pepper trading company, and that evolved into VKL Seasonings, which is a seasoning company. Basically, when originally one of the multinationals came to India to start their QSRs, they needed a local partner to create their seasonings. Actually, that's the background. And at that time, when they came to India, they were the pioneers, and they did not have their partners from the US who came with them. They didn't follow them typically. Otherwise, as you know, multinational comes with this whole entourage of vendors who establish themselves. They did not come. So to their credit, they taught us how to build create seasonings. So we got into this courtesy of one of the multinational QSRs. This would have been in the late 1990s, early 2000s is when it started. We therefore started with the QSRs, including at that time McDonald's, KFC, Pizza Hut, Domino's were the first ones off the block. But the business was relatively small, and so I was trying to understand how do you grow the seasoning business. And one of the biggest sectors at that time was the snack foods, which was a much larger business already, courtesy of Lay's at that time. I saw that the opportunity to grow the seasoning business was also to go from just being a QSR vendor to also supply to snack food companies. So I started evolving and working on how to create seasonings for snack food companies. In the process, we also realized that without flavors or top notes, as we call it,
Yeah.
you cannot create a snack food seasoning. So I went and acquired a flavor company from a very outstanding technical entrepreneur called late Dr. Mantri. He had created this tiny flavor company in Mumbai in Andheri called Beta Chemicals. So I acquired that in 2006, and therefore I had the whole bouquet. I could create seasonings for QSRs, I could make seasonings for snack foods, and in the process I also had a nice boutique flavor company in the process. So that has been the journey. I got partnered by True North, leading Indian private equity
Yeah.
company in 2013, and we grew the business together as partners till we evolved into the leading seasoning company of India. I'm proud and happy to say that we beat all the multinationals to the seasoning game, and we were far ahead, being the pioneers in both doing QSR seasonings as well as snack food seasonings, and doing seasonings for the food industry. So no other seasoning company in India. There were either seasoning companies, the multinationals either focused only on snack foods, or
Right.
they only focused on QSRs, and virtually nobody focused on the food industry. So we are the only people who did all three and had a unique business model in that sense. And in the process, that is one. The second thing which we did pioneering at that stage was we supported the Indian snack food company. So at that time, if you go back to the 2006-7, Frito-Lay and Lay's chips dominated the entire Indian market.
Right.
But we worked closely with Indian companies, including Balaji from Gujarat, then Haldiram, both from Nagpur as well as from Delhi, and ITC, of course. Then at that time, a company like Green Dot was emerging, which is Cornitos in the corn chips, and last but not the least, Pratap Snacks in Indore. So I would say what we did was we worked closely with this Indian snack food companies, which were frankly not getting the level of attention from multinational snack food, multinational seasoning suppliers that we could give. We innovated for them, and I am happy to say that we were played a critical part in their growth. So that has been the journey of VKL seasonings. I keep going and talking about the rest of the journey from there.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So what happened in VKL seasoning is by 2019 it was also time for True North to exit, like a typical private equities. They have to 5 to 7 years is their lifespan, and so True North exited, and in the process, Firmenich came in as a Firmenich is a leading Swiss flavor company.
Right.
So they partnered with us, and that journey went on from 2019 to 2023.
Mhm.
And in 2023, I exited VKL Seasonings to Firmenich. So now it's a Firmenich company, and Firmenich itself was acquired by DSM. So it's DSM Firmenich.
Okay.
Uh, in this journey, while I was partner with True North, I could see the writing on the wall that at some point I'm going to have to exit the seasoning business.
Mm.
And that brings me to the next chapter, which has to do with, so why did FSIPL come up from? So that's quite a story around that itself. In the case of, so we are this top seasoning company of India. We are the go-to partner for QSRs. We are the go-to partner for snack food companies, especially the Indian snack food companies. And I work personally very closely with the owners of Haldiram, Balaji, Pratap Snacks, and Green Dot and so on, and work very closely with the owners and help them hopefully to also build out these businesses.
Mhm.
At that time, I had this I call him a rogue salesman in the south, who the business was growing, and he had started to appoint a couple of distributors. I remember distinctly this day when I'm looking at the receivable statement and generally checking how the things are going, and there were these 2 3 names that popped up, and I said, okay, I don't even know who these people are, and typically I knew every single customer. So I asked the sales head, what is going on, who's this? There were one company in Chennai, one in Karnataka, and one in Kerala. I remember that also distinctly. So I found out that there was this rogue sales guy based out of Kerala who was looking after South sales, and I called him and said, "Look, who are these 3 people? What are these guys doing?" And we are the top end seasoning company. We deal with the owners and CEOs, and I don't even know who these 3 customers are. So he said, "No, they are. I've appointed these 3 distributors to sell our products." So I said, "Look, his name is Saju," and told Saju, we are the top end seasoning company. We don't sit and deal with distributors and all that. I don't want to be in this kind of business. We deal with the owners here and with the biggest companies. So I don't want you to sit and waste time on that." And that was the end of that conversation. Then after another 3 or 6 months, again I looked at the receivable statement, and the business, again the receivables had ballooned up. So I called this guy in and said, "Look, what's going on here? I told you to shut this thing down, and instead you're growing the business." As it turned out, he explained to me that these were companies that were selling fryers for frying chicken in
Mm.
Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. So he said if they're selling a fryer for fried chicken, they can also buy a seasoning for marinating the chicken, as well as for breading and coating and so on. So he said that, look, it made sense to me that if he's already selling fryers all over the state, he can also sell the software, so to speak, which is a consumable.
Mm.
So he's the one, to be very honest. The whole thought about that there is an opportunity to build a distribution came from this chap who I call as our rogue sales guy. And that's also a lesson in that sense that frankly, when you talk about the strategy as well as how you execute the strategy being adjacencies and how do you execute, one of the key sources of input to me in business has always been your sales people, of course,
Yeah.
and customers and your vendors. You get more knowledge about what to do from your customer than you get from absolutely anybody, because you get so many ideas when you talk to them.
Right.
And there is no better example of it than this one, where
Mm.
this fellow, through creating this distribution, germinated this idea of building distribution in that sense. That is one. The second part of the journey actually has to do with my education in the US, where when I was studying there, now if you are in the highway in the US, the most ubiquitous trucks on the US highways will be more of Amazon, of course, and UPS continues to be the United Parcel Service, and FedEx. Uh, but in those days, in the late 80s, the more ubiquitous truck, that because FedEx was just emerging at that time,
Mhm.
UPS was around. There was no sign of Amazon, of course. But the most ubiquitous truck on the highways in the US used to be of Cisco, SYSCO,
Mhm.
and you would see these gleaming chrome trucks with just Cisco written on that. and I had seen that this same company's trucks used to roll into our campus on the university, and the same company's products were also in the pantry in the kitchen for where we were served the food. Like if you had pasta, typically the pasta sauce would be from a Cisco can, you know.
Hmm.
So I had been always curious to understand what this company does. How come there are so many trucks plying? So that my first understanding actually of food service had come from the US education, and I had understood what a Cisco does, that this is a consolidator and so on. So that had been kind of at the back of the head at that time. And suddenly this convergence happened when I saw this my sales guys sitting and appointing distributors, this notion of Cisco at the back. So I just
Mm.
started to think, okay, maybe there's an opportunity here. Although we started small with putting up a few distributors, just predominantly in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka. So it started like that in about 2000, somewhere around 2012 to 2013 or so.
Right.
And as it started to develop, as I told you, we are still partners with True North, and from 2013 onwards. So I seeing the picture that I would have to at some point exit VKL Seasonings.
Mhm.
I arrived at an understanding with True North that I would start to carve out the food service business into a separate company.
Right.
And True North was very practical and fair as a partner, and very ethical in that sense, and they helped therefore create this separate business.
Mhm.
So that is how food service got created as a company. And what I did is, with their at that time we were both shareholders in VKL Seasonings as well as in food service, and I carved out the food service business into Food Service India.
Okay.
And that's the journey of the company starting out, and then we'll get into, I guess, the product
Yeah.
categories and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. No, wonderful. I think there's so much to unpack here, but maybe I'll just go back to VKL. And
Yes.
I was very curious. I mean, especially when you have these MNCs coming to India now, and you talked about, like the likes of Lay's and the snack food companies and the QSRs, right? And then of course you've worked also a lot with, let's say, the Indian companies. How is the experience different with them? Because I think they come with so much of SOPs and structures and rigid systems.
Correct.
I think just engaging with them and then having to engage with, I would imagine, the likes of Firmenich, the other ingredient companies, who kind of help these guys. So if you could just kind of give us a sense
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. Again, a great question, because I think both engaging. So I'll first talk on the customer end and then come to the supplier end.
Sure.
So what you see typically in both the QSR as well as at least what we saw in the QSR and the snack food industry when you talk about the customers is the predominant difference between first I'll talk about the QSR and then I'll go to the snack food
Sure.
industry. The first difference is that the international QSRs are where they have a huge plus, and that's why they are so successful, as we know, and between McDonald's and KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, Domino's, is that they have, what the point which you mentioned is there, while they have a lot of systems and SOPs, that is actually their strength, and that combined with their phenomenal capability in supply chain management.
Right.
So the biggest differentiator and the biggest plus point, I would say, frankly, of the international chains is that their supply chain management and SOPs absolutely ensure a phenomenal consistency of the customer experience. And this customer experience is not just about the food, but it's also about the overall experience when you're ordering on the app or ordering in the restaurant, and sitting picking up the order, sitting down, the cleanliness of the restaurant as well as the toilets and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So the biggest difference that we have seen in the QSR space is the innovation approach of the Indian entrepreneurs is much faster and much
Yeah.
more open and more dynamic, because also the owner is also the decision maker, and he or she is quickly making decisions on menu innovation, on supplier innovation.
Mhm.
But one area, frankly, whereas the multinationals are more structured and more rigid in that sense, and
Right.
typically they are innovating today for something that they will launch
Mhm.
earliest possible. The launch will be 6 to 9 months from now, and typically they'll build this library which is 12 months from now.
Mhm.
So in that sense, you see a slower turnaround time and slower go-to market in the case of multinationals. but great strength on the supply chain management and on consistency of experience.
Right.
Where the Indian entrepreneurs are excelling, however, is in the speed of decision making. And but having said that, and being much more innovative in that sense, but
Right.
where they frankly lack and where they get challenged, and that's why you see typical Indian own QSRs will go up to, there are some have gone up to 300-400 outlets, but I think one would have to see what is the level of experience that the consumer has there. But
Right.
typically at 100-150 they start to see tremendous problems of growing beyond that, because they cannot give a good customer experience, because they're not investing in the SOPs and supply chain. As the supply chain also requires an investment, Vivek,
Right.
and the Indian guys who start out small and have started, are typically pioneering, have started with one restaurant and then go to five, and then five becomes 15, 15 becomes 50, 50 becomes 100, 150, and then the sudden plateauing starts.
Right. Right.
They don't want to invest in the supply chain, which is this overhead,
Mm.
and that's where the whole stumbling starts. That's the so-called QSR difference, is how I would say. In the
Right.
case of snacks, is a little bit different, because in snacks, what happens is your customer experience is in the packet.
Mhm.
Once I've done my job of putting the product in the pack and sealing the pack, then it's a level playing field for everybody.
Right.
So what the Indian folks have done there, to their credit, be it Haldiram, be it Balaji, be it ITC, what these guys have done is they have not done any shortcuts on their investment in plant and technology, and they've been outstanding with that. So there, if you see a factory of any of these guys, it will be at least as good, if not frankly, in some cases better than that of the multinational snack food companies.
Yeah.
So they have, that is one of the key reasons why they have killed the multinationals, and the multinational shares have been plunging year on year, whereas the Indian owned snack food companies have grown phenomenally, absolutely, and have been tremendous value creators, because they didn't have to sit and deal with that experience. Their experience of the customer finishes in the pack. They
Right.
invest in the technology, and there the differentiator is that they have been very dynamic in decision making, and
Right.
have reinvested all the profits in the business, and that's one of the key success stories that we saw, at least in the snack space. Yeah.
Fascinating. I mean, in fact, just to see that the Indian company is now willing to make those capex investments to set up
Yes.
technology at the front end so that you can really compete and set up
Yes.
a level playing field is fascinating.
Yeah.
However, I completely agree with you. I think when we look at the Indian company when it comes to QSRs, I mean, they definitely started. In fact, our ex-colleague of mine who started this cafe chain across, he's touched 200, and again the same challenges that you have in supply chain. And I'm sure we'll be able to figure this out and really
Sure.
kind of get there. But what has really fascinated me is that while, of course, the MNCs are kind of slow, they're
Mm.
process driven, the willingness nowadays to kind of customize to the local taste has been very interesting. And
Yes.
I think even if you look at the McDonald's, right, I think the number one selling burger is McAloo Tikki, right? I
Yeah.
mean, here you are selling just a fancy product, vada pav out there, and
Correct.
doing very well, right? So have you had any interesting, what you want to say, interactions with them while they're trying to figure out or localize the flavor or taste with the vehicle, business?
Sure. No, absolutely. I think so. That brings me to one of my other motherhood principles in this thing.
Yeah.
Another one is that I truly believe that the best food in the world is eaten by Indians. Nobody
Right.
eats because
The
one is we have
variety.
yeah, exactly. One is we have like a more. I don't think we are a 3,000 or 5,000 year civilization. We are 10,000 plus year. Just that the all that history will come out in due course. Let me put it this way. So our food has evolved over so many years that it is way superior to anything that you eat anywhere in the world. Potentially, with the possible exception maybe of parts of China, but I think that's a matter of personal taste.
Yeah.
So, having said that, one is our food has evolved so much. Number one, two is you and I eat such mind-boggling variety of food.
Of
Nobody
any
else in the world,
species.
you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The third thing is then it's all freshly. It's a complex food and it's all freshly made. So the subah Vivek may have eaten say aloo paratha with a nice fresh dahi at home or whatever it is, on local butter or whatever it is. I happen to have had an upma all homemade today morning. Who gets this much variety? You go to a breakfast buffet in India, it's mind-boggling, So you go in the Western world, you'll have some horrible cornflakes and some scrambled egg which has been lying there for God knows how long, and. So having said that, to your point, therefore, is that we have the best food in the world is eaten by Indians. I firmly believe that. So having said that, there was no alternative for the QSRs but to adopt to the Indian palate. So they've followed. I think they've kept the format in the Western format, but they've adopted the Indian food into that format. So hence I mean, you might call it as a vada pav, but it started out as a burger, and then they visualize what is the most sensible vegetarian version of burger. It may or may not have gone as a vada pav concept, but the point is that's where it started from. I would say a McDonald's will always claim that it started from a burger and then evolved into aloo tikki, whereas you and I might say, yeah, but it's a vada pav, and that you adopted to make it label of a burger.
But
That one can
it's
debate.
delicious.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
exactly.
they've done a great job with that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So our experience, we had a great experience in that. In fact, with McDonald's, and we worked closely with their team to create the piri piri. So the piri piri of McDonald's in West and South is made by VKL Seasonings.
Wow.
Yeah.
The piri piri that goes in the fries, which gives the
Yes.
oh my, okay.
Yes. That
And
magical
you've got the
product.
whole you've got the whole country addicted to that now.
Yeah, correct. Especially the Western population, typically speaking, is somewhere. First of all, it resonates with all Indians because
Right.
we did a lot of work and work closely with McDonald's team,
Mhm.
and we saw that it resonated because it had a combination of garlic, lime, and chili, which is every Indian loves garlic, lime, and chili in some form or the other, and that we got the right balance of that. And it again, piri piri is more a Caribbean and African
Yeah.
concept, but we adopted to Indian palate by tweaking it to a little bit more limey and garlicky in that sense, so that's an example of where we have worked to adopt to Indian, as you correctly said, to adopt to Indian palates. We have, to be very frank, we have made in the past. VKL Seasoning has made several attempts to do another thing for fries, for the Shake fries, but
Mhm.
nothing beats, in spite of repeated innovation
Mhm.
from the consumer point of view, just nothing comes close to the piri piri experience for an Indian consumer. So,
Right. Right.
and it has been so good that over time we have adopted it to sauces, we've adopted to marinade, we've
Right.
adopted it to gravy, and it works like magic.
Right. No, it's delightful. I mean, it really brings in the Indianness out,
Correct.
in otherwise a very regular American food.
And Western food, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So moving across from VKL to your distribution business, and
Yes.
Horeca, of course, is hotels, restaurants, catering, right?
It does.
So the
Yes.
whole idea is about, I would imagine, is helping with the distribution of products, ingredients, and everything to this industry.
Yeah.
Could you kind of help us understand what's the kind of scale and the scope that you try to cover with FSI?
Yes. So I think in some ways what we have done is we've democratized the availability of Western food concepts. First of all, that is the beginning of it. So we democratized so that that could be available not only to a multinational like a McDonald's or a KFC, but could reach every single restaurant. It started from there for us in that sense. So when we started our food service business, initially we took some of the seasonings, which is what our original DNA was, and quickly followed by some beverage syrups to restaurants and cafes all over. So if you visualize about 2016, 17 and thereabouts, the cafe things like cafe coffee day and things like that were just spreading out, and this whole culture of cafes was spreading. By then, all the multinationals had also been spreading, so popularity of KFC, Pizza Hut, and all that was starting to happen. So how does a local entrepreneur be able to produce solutions like that?
Right.
So at that time, there were basically these solutions were predominantly created by three or four companies. Vivek, one was bun suppliers, one was poultry suppliers,
Hmm.
third was mayonnaise guys, and fourth was seasoning. So
Right.
actually, the magic got created by this four groups of companies who started to realize that it is not just a, if people are eating at McDonald's and KFC, there are, at that time there was no KFC or McDonald's in some parts of cities, in some parts of and definitely not in remotely in tier 3 4 towns, of course. So how that reached is through that is the origin of what we realized was in food service, that जो आपको बॉम्बे में मैकडॉनल्ड्स में को खाने मिलता है, what you get to eat in Bombay, Delhi, surely a person in Nagpur, Nasik, or for that matter will also be aspiring.
Mhm.
So we took that solution to these tier 2 3 towns, and that started to create a demand.
Mhm.
So we adopted these concepts and said that, look, this should also work for other people, and that has been one of the origins originally of so for, at least for us, FSIPL, the
Mhm.
initial growth was in taking what was being sold by multinationals to other cafes and restaurants and providing the, so we helped what we call as, we have two types of solutions. We have menu solutions and we have kitchen solutions. A
Mhm.
menu solution is things like a piri piri or a marinade which enhances the menu of a restaurant.
Mhm.
So we help bring items on their menus which they didn't have.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so we suddenly their whole menu changed, and they had not just a chicken 65 or Manchurian chicken gobi Manchurian or chicken Manchurian, but also suddenly they had fried chicken. They had a piri piri marinated chicken. They had all these different types of or a burger patty with which they never had before. You know,
Right.
so that is the first step in our journey in growing the business.
Mhm.
We were also the pioneers in beverage syrup solutions. So in 2016, there was only one multinational which was doing beverage syrups. So they they brought the culture of cocktails and cafes at that time, and we were the first Indian company to bring that also to the cafes, so that you could go to any cafe owner could suddenly start serving this nice hazelnut coffee and Irish cream coffee and tiramisu coffee and so on. And that is the background of our syrup business. So basically, we helped enhance the menus of these. So that journey starts there in 2016 to 18, 19. Then suddenly COVID hits, of course, and that's a whole different chapter and leads to another phase in the growth of the industry. So
Right. Fascinating. I mean, so what's the kind of product, should I say, breadth do you have when you offer the solution? Because I think the nuances that are required from
yes,
restaurant and QSRs to another would be pretty huge, right? So
yes,
help us understand that, sir.
yeah, yeah. No, again, you're absolutely bang on. So the just to take the picture back, as I told you that I start out with this food service business. I have this picture of Cisco at the back of my head.
Hmm.
So our journey for FSIPL in the food service is very different from other companies who are playing in the food service
Mhm.
space. So there are of course a company like Nestle has a food service business. Unilever has had a food service business. But for them, food service business is a distribution channel
Right.
for distributing their same products which they have in the consumer. They have it in a slightly different packaging format or maybe slightly tweaked for
Mhm.
the institutional, but basically selling same or similar product in a institutional. So it's just distribution channel.
Right.
FSIPL is a very different. We are a complete solution provider to the. So we are not looking inside out. We are looking at outside in. So we are looking at what does the customer need to run his or her business. What are all the solutions which we need? Therefore, we sell what they need and not what we produce.
Mhm.
So we are the pioneers and the only complete solution provider. Therefore, our breadth of products is the most vast. breadth of products in the food service industry. We do seasonings, we do spices. So we also have like an MDH or a Everest or a whatever it might be. We have this full spice range. We have gravies,
Mhm.
we have sauces for cooking sauces as well as dipping sauces. Then we have beverage mixes. We have got pasta. We've got breadcrumbs. We've got canned foods, bottled fruits, vegetables, the whole spectrum.
Mhm.
Whereas our competition only dabbles in one or two of these
Mhm.
product categories. So it's a very different business approach.
Mhm.
And some of this has to do with my the seed which was planted of Cisco in my head,
Mhm.
that they're a complete solution provider. Whatever you need, they provide to you. So we can, if Vivek were to start a restaurant tomorrow, uh, we could do any cuisine that you want: Indian cuisine, Oriental cuisine, Chinese cuisine, continental cuisine, Italian cuisine, Thai, soon, hopefully, Japanese. So we are there to provide you all the solutions. What
Mhm.
today we don't do is we don't yet do commodities, which we don't like. I don't supply you rice or oil or wheat or sugar. Eventually, we will do that too. But today we can sit down with you and create a menu which goes across the cuisines,
Right.
and that is our business model. So our business model is very different from the other companies who are in the food service space, for whom this is a distribution channel, whereas we only exist for the customer, and we only exist therefore with the complete solution.
Right. Right.
So,
Fascinating. In fact, Ajay, it'd be great if you could, maybe just help the audience understand the nuances that goes into tasting. Because, like, for example, I came to know that there are some 20 to 24 TAS2 receptors that we have, starting all the way from the tip of the tongue and going all the way down into the
the
stomach,
stomach
into the gut,
and to the brain, yes,
and
yeah,
to the brain, and you just think of taste as something that just happens here, but actually, especially when you look at bitterness and sweet, there are different parts of the thing. uh, I think it's a very fascinating science. I mean, I have a little bit of an idea because we have a family business which has some interest in this area, but would love your perspective on this. You know any anecdotes or any interesting insights on this area?
sure. No, yeah, I think the again, I probably am less scientific on this than you might be in that sense. So I don't proclaim to be any techno expert, but within my limited knowledge, so of course, first of all, your palate itself has got the receptors in different parts of the tongue. So you will feel the heat in one part,
Mm.
the sweetness in another part, the sourness and the bitterness in different parts of your tongue. Having said that, Joe, I'll just start with some interesting anecdote for you. And so, one of the key things that we do in the processed food business, which originally maybe started with the snack food industry,
Mhm.
is so the before the stomach, the biggest action in the food is happening between your tongue and your brain, actually,
Right.
and the stomach comes much later.
Mm.
And the first signal is going from the palate to the brain. And the basic science that all of us in the processed food industry are working with is
Mhm.
to make you salivate. So the minute you start salivating, your brain is again telling you this is good, therefore eat more.
Mhm.
And our it's not some we are not doing any manipulation or anything. This is a basic food chemistry
Mhm.
that you enhance the salivation so that the customer is encouraged to your endorphins start to flow. You start to feel very good and happy, and
Mhm.
therefore you start to eat more. That is one part. Similar, so that's one of the things that we. I will not sit and elaborate on which ingredient and all that, because that gets into some complicated sphere, and I don't want to get
Right.
into trouble. But basically, our job is to make you feel happy. So the food,
Mm.
what we are doing is the way we construct the food is to ensure टेस्ट गुड. यानी क्या होता है टेस्ट गुड? आपको आपका टंग नहीं बताती है, आपका दिमाग बताता है. It's
Mm.
your brain that is telling you that this is tasting good, not your tongue. Your
Mm.
tongue is just the input source, but the
Right.
neuron goes to the brain, and then the triggers all the happiness. That's one of the reasons, for instance, why, as I say, the globally all popular input is vanilla. Why does everybody in the world, and why is the most popular flavor of ice cream vanilla? Is
Yeah.
because vanilla makes you happy. It's
Okay.
universal, you know.
Right.
So, and which is the reason why vanilla sells more than anything. It's not just why is it the most popular, because it's happiness. and vanilla is therefore built into a disproportionate number of sweet flavors. Even a dairy milk chocolate has vanilla in it.
Right. Right.
Mm. So we have to answer your question, and I'm not sure if I'm giving you the level of color and flavor, but literally that's what we are focused on
Right.
doing. And our job is therefore to obviously focus on that, and that we have to keep in mind. So our vision statement itself for me as a company is we make great tasting food. The
Right.
first thing that my R&D team is also told is, so we don't produce anything that our own kids will not love and will be safe for them to eat, and they
Right.
have to enjoy eating, and that is the one of the basic benchmarks. So I personally taste every single product that is created before we either launch it or create it for a customer, and pitch it to a customer. uh, Having said that, our approach therefore, just to add to your question, is, so the way we work is we work with the three layers of chef, food technologists, and food scientists. We have three layers of people who are working. So it's not a simple ऐसे खुद
Yeah.
किसी ने किचन में बना दिया और प्रोडक्ट बन गया, ऐसे नहीं होता है. It is a very complex process.
Yeah.
We have chefs trained from the OCLD, the Oberoi Culinary School, or the Taj system, who are the working in the innovation part of the company. Anything which, so first is the he or she, and we have a combination of them who are creating the magical product, which the food scientist is tasting along with the chef, and she or he is tasting it and understanding. Okay, chef, this tastes good. Now give me the recipe. So he sits down, or she sits down and takes the recipe and starts to convert that into something which is can be produced with the ingredients, because we cannot cook everything with absolutely from scratch. We have to be able to
Right.
reproduce it. And
Right.
then comes the role of the food technologist, who takes it from what chef passes on to food scientist. The food scientist passes on to a food technologist, who takes it onto a production floor and scales it up. So there's a lot of science involved in this, and that is how we produce the one, from taking the magic from the chef to something which becomes magic on the consumer end, in terms of a consistent, great tasting food.
Right. No, fascinating. I think, like you said, it's just not about adding a little more salt or pepper or testing. I mean, there's a lot of science that goes
Yes,
behind building this thing. And especially, like what is the impact of the ingredients on your palate in different food types, along with different food types. There's a lot of implications that really come into play.
yes,
Lovely stuff. Ajay, the other thought I was having is, as you were talking about, the spices and the ingredients, you know, 250, 300 years back, the Britishers landed up really in India because of the spice that we had, and they just stayed on. I mean, they kind of overstayed our hospitality and they hung
correct,
around here for
correct,
so many years because they just loved what we were doing, right?
correct.
Uh, how important now is really exports as part of the business? I mean, and how do you see the opportunity size of spice? Because apparently at least the Britishers loved it, and I'm sure that there's a big demand for it. So could you just kind of add some color on that?
Sure. So I think, see, for India, the as you correctly started, just as the journey started from not just the British. In fact, British followed the Dutch and the Portuguese, who landed up first, looking for the spices, and the first guys were, of course, the Arabs who were doing it, and then the whole secret came out by these guys landing up. So what is the opportunity? As you correctly pointed out, while it started out with the spices, and India is a massive exporter of spices now, and the with the staggering in billions now in terms of value of spices being exported from India. But a lot of that spice export is been, of course, in value-added spices, in terms of spice mixes, oleoresins, and extracts, and so on, so forth. But in the meantime, what has ended up happening is also the Indian food export has also become a very big opportunity. So while it started out originally with export to the Indian diaspora abroad, now when you travel abroad, as both of us know, of course, UK is a total exception, where Indian food is their actual national food, as we know, Butter chicken is considered the so-called British national dish, and but the rest of the world, frankly, the food export has been an opportunity which originally has started out with the exporting mainly for the Indian diaspora. So, disproportionate amount of Indian food is exported through the in the classic. You have parathas and rice and curries and so on, which are predominantly distributed through the Indian stores and or are available through the Indian restaurant chains. But one thing which I would say, which has some legs to run still, is to be very honest, just as there are no Indian QSRs in abroad, there are very few Indian QSRs. Yes, you will see a few Sarvana Bhavan and or Haldiram here and there, but it's not
Yeah.
a. We have not created a McDonald's yet. In
Yeah.
neither have we created in India, and therefore we have not created it in abroad at the moment. Whereas in that sense, if you see the Chinese ingredients or the Chinese food and the Thai food is probably a, given the size of their country and this thing is a little bit more available than Indian food is for the mainstream population in the Western countries.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can see it. You can either see it as glass is half empty or half full. I
Right.
think it's a great opportunity, and we have a long way to go further in increasing the export. Therefore, so the opportunity is absolutely huge, and we are only right now. If you see the Indian shelf in a supermarket in the Western world,
It's
it'll
just
have barely one or two brands, and it's very small.
yeah.
And it is whereas the popularity and the familiarity of Indian food is much greater.
Right.
But in our reading is that for that, I think two, three things have to happen. One is, frankly, Indian restaurants and QSRs will have to grow. Uh, there's a PF Chang and there is a Walk Express and there are many Chinese QSRs which are already widely prevalent all over, especially the QSR capital of the world, which is the United States. But
Yeah.
there are no Indian QSRs, and I think
Right.
typically the way the trend works is you have a Michelin restaurants, which translates into fine dining restaurants, which translates into QSR, and that QSR eventually leads to a retail shelf food.
Mm.
That's
Mm.
the classic, so to speak, journey which happens. A first innovation happens at the so-called top-end restaurant, and then it trickles down to the retail shelf. So we are, as Indians, the good news is that we have a huge export already of processed food.
Mm.
It is an important opportunity, but the bad news is that we have a lot of runway left to
Right.
catch. Yeah.
But Ajay, to your point, and when I've really thought about it, like when you, let's say, well, especially when you're abroad, while in India we have QSRs and some chains like mainland China, they're all kind of expanding. But when you go into the US, I mean, you obviously they have these fantastic, single outlets out there. Maybe maybe a 3 or 4. We don't have a chain out there, right? Is it about there's more difficulty? I mean, would you say it's about having difficulty about having the consistency given the complexity of a food, or is that just an excuse, or are there any other underlying reasons?
No, I think it is an excuse. It's pehle, you see, there is, as you know, the classic rule of export is you have to first create the market in your home base. You cannot land up abroad suddenly and just create this market. Nobody has been able to do it for anything, from radios to scooters to cars to electronics to anything in the world. Nobody has created a export market. There might be one or two exceptions, but by and large, the classic industry rule is create the home market and then you go abroad.
Export. Yeah.
Yeah. So first answer, tragically for you, is this is my reading of it is that the jab tak, as long as in India we don't create and the beginning has started. I think it is more than you have some of the leading for instance, Haldiram is beginning to now Bikaner wala Haldiram, they are beginning to spread out. But I think the basic issue has to do with what we started the conversation, which is that the SOPs and the supply chain has to get strengthened. If that doesn't happen, you cannot grow. And I think
Right.
that animal has to be tackled by the Indian QSR pioneers. Only then they will be able to.
Right.
Until somebody builds, frankly, 1,000 outlets in India.
That's when they do have going out.
Yes, yeah, and then you need all the supply chain partners. They will have to go with you to.
Right.
The other thing which happens, to be very candid, I can't take names, but to disproportionate number of the good, there are good Indian QSRs, but they are limited in number, like I said. I told you, जब एक बार 100-150 क्रॉस किया तो सब खलास हो
Yeah.
गया. So why are some of them not crossing 100 plus is, and I will not take the names, is because they are massively backward integrated and run a lot of supply chain in-house. But you cannot do that because even that limits your growth.
Right.
You have to get it out of your system, and that is not happening. And that is where we are stuck with no Indian QSRs abroad because there are no Indian QSRs in India.
I think our ability to work with partners and
Yes.
really build a very cohesive supply chain is probably the limiting factor right now, like you rightly pointed out.
It will happen. I think I will be shocked if in the next 10 years it doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it better happen because I keep telling, joking among friends that listen, if some enterprising entrepreneur doesn't do one, we'll soon have like the way you have the best pizza is obviously from Italy, but the chains that you have are from America, right? I mean, the Domino's and the Pizza Hut and all of that, right?
Yeah.
I said, I wouldn't be surprised if actually tomorrow some enterprising guy from there who gets a supply chain, Sunday you'll have a branded American Indian food restaurant in India, right?
Yeah, the Chinese chains in the US, just for your benefit, are American, are not
Taco Bell, everything. It's all. I mean, so they've done a fantastic job of
absolutely. They are
building
masters of.
brands and supply chain. I would imagine.
Yes,
Right?
yes. Yeah,
You
वही होने वाला है. That's what's going to happen.
I hope somebody who's on this pod right now, listening in, will really take this. I think it's a huge opportunity, and I am sure if we just double down, there'll be it's exciting stuff to do.
No, in India itself, Vivek, the opportunity, forget about USA, the opportunity in India to see at the end of the day, just to digress for a second, both of us, if you see the how, if you do a simple math of how often would you eat a pizza or a burger versus how often would you eat dal, chawal, roti, paratha, sabzi, finally the 75% plus of your meals are basic Indian food.
Correct.
And therefore the QSRs have to and will come up. It's just that is very fragmented today.
Absolutely. Sir, just shifting gears a bit, there's so much of change happening at the frontier of food technology. Especially if you look at it, this whole thing about plant-based meat that's come up in a big way, and those evolution that's happening. There's talks happening about synthetic meat. I mean, of course, that's a little further out, and right now the cost economics don't add up, right? But the plant has happened. I mean, you've had the Impossible, I think foods or Impossible Burger in the US and Beyond Meat coming up there. What are your thoughts about the trends that we're going to see soon happening over the next few years?
Yeah, so I think that the alternate protein trend or the alternate meat trend, whichever way you want to call it, frankly has run out of steam at the moment. To be very honest, it has run what it was going to do, and then it's petered off for a couple of reasons. I will not, even before I come to India, the basic thing for them challenge has been to define who's the target consumer of that,
right?
And they've gotten stuck in a niche segment of it and not got mainstream. And therefore the industry, which promised a lot, has not quite picked up. One of the basic reasons being, and this brings us to also the same reason why it's not grown, had too many legs in the US, or which is where it was pioneered, is similar to the reason why it's not got any legs in India, frankly. Is basically because, see, the person who's eating the alternate protein is actually does not want to sit and eat it as a meat. Because the very reason why you're eating it is because you don't want to have the meat. And so they got confused thinking people wanted to eat meat, and they brought this mock blood into it, and so on and so forth. That, I think, is a niche of a niche.
Right.
If you want all
for the people who are going vegan and missing their steak and everything, right?
Correct. But that is a niche of a niche. That is if you want blood oozing out of the meat, why would you want to sit and eat mock meat? You eat the real thing and enjoy it. So I think they overestimated, frankly, the capability. In India, that is the bigger problem, which is it's a very niche product, which is one is because we are the mother of vegetarian food, as you know, all over the world.
Absolutely.
And therefore, what need are you meeting? You're meeting more a need for, frankly, to be very blunt, young people who have a lot of. It's more a issue about ethics and not eating meat and not killing animals and so on and so forth. I think that for them, then why would you eat again when you have so many vegetarian options? Why
Right.
would you want to go for something like this? And there it's a so I think it just didn't take off. One is for that reason, and second is that it's good, but it's nowhere near as good as neither as good as meat, and neither is it as good as a regular vegetarian food.
Right.
So and that's why it's gotten become a niche of a niche, and that's what has led to the shrink of.
Right.
So that industry, I think, has got a limited applicability. Maybe it will have applicability. One of the areas that we think it will have applicability is going to be heaven help us that this should not happen. In the unlikely event that there is a cataclysmic event which affects the meat supply chain and meat
Right.
and any form of meat, and there have been these stray incidents of be it mad cow, be it bird
Bird
flu,
flu.
and so on and
Right.
so forth. And I
Mm.
really, really hope that such a thing does not happen. But in the unlikely accidental events, with that time, these things will come up, will be an
So it's
option.
actually the mainstream population wanting the alternative
Yeah,
rather than
correct, correct, correct. But those will be these spikes which will occur and then go
I
away.
can also already see a conspiracy theory playing out for when the next, bird flu or
Correct.
something happens. Like, who's
Who
benefiting?
caused
Always
it?
follow the money, right? Who's benefiting?
Yeah,
Uh,
correct.
but what is your view, sir, when you think about precision fermentation and synthetic meat? I mean, that's not so much from the taste point of view or the, the vegan option. It's more about sustainability point of view. Do you have any thoughts around that?
I think the two three things. One is going to be first of all is going to be the economics, because the cost of producing that is absolutely ridiculously high. Number one, and I think the second part is going to be the health issues. The jury is out on exactly what that's to find out what is actually doing to your own
DNA
body
level,
chemistry and
absolutely.
DNA will take just maybe a generation
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
People are
absolutely.
very afraid of that, and I think
Right.
we have a. I think the closest experience, to put it very crudely, but since I'm in the food industry, I would say is the
Right.
so-called COVID vaccine experience. You and I know that
Yeah.
beyond a point, we don't know what these vaccines have done to us.
Right.
We are only discovering as we go along. And can
Right.
you imagine eating every day something which is grown in a lab?
Lab.
You're really
Yeah.
pushing it. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, it's very
That's true,
dangerous.
and I think that's the challenge, because as we, obviously, human progress is linked to development and science and changing. Everything that's happened is because
Right.
of technology and development. But
Mm.
yeah, you're so true. You never know really what's the impact in the long run, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
your whole DNA could start getting altered.
yeah,
So you don't know what it does.
right.
Yeah.
And that brings me to another very pertinent point, Ajay. Health and wellness.
Yes.
So I think the development in food. I mean, I would say over the last 100 years has revolutionized.
Correct.
From being a world where there was always hunger, famine, and everything. I think the processed food industry, especially. I mean,
Sure.
you're hungry, you go open the fridge, there's stuff out there. You can open the shelf, you can go to a supermarket. So, I mean, wherever there's no economic crisis, food is no longer a challenge from that point of view, at least at this point in time, right?
Correct.
But obviously, at the same time, there've been a lot of pushbacks from people saying that, look, this over-processed industry is becoming a problem. In the long run, it's impacting the health, your well-being of people. And the fact that when you talk about hypertension, diabetes, India unfortunately is the diabetic capital of
Obesity.
the world, right?
Yeah.
What is your thought on this? Because of course it's a balancing act. We
Sure.
need food security on one side.
Correct.
At the same time, we are struggling with these health issues. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. So I think that this is a complicated. See, the Western situation and the Indian situation, first of all, are somewhat different. Uh, First, and touch a sensitive subject, but it's important to address that, is the one key role that the processed food industry fulfills and is supposed to fulfill, and does an outstanding job of fulfilling it in the Western world, is to control food inflation.
That's true.
Okay. And there's a brilliant job, because that's one of the key. You cannot believe how cost effective food is especially in the United States. It's mind boggling how cost effective it is. The food inflation is absolutely completely under control. They never
Right.
talk about any. You will see that you will never see a US media sitting and talking about pyaz ka price, tomato price, and onion price, and rarely they will talk about meat prices, for instance.
Ajay, that's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah.
So that is something which is a sensitive subject, but I'm getting treading into some dangerous ground. But that's something which the government really needs to pay attention to here. If they don't do that, there will be recurring problems every year. Okay, so let me just the too much of the, and this is and I'm not saying that they don't have the right intention. They have the right intention, but we've had challenges with the farm laws and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. Okay,
Yeah.
now the point is there is too much attention on rice, wheat, sugar
Mm-hmm.
in India on terms of production, and so the all the so-called inflationary first focus goes only to wheat, rice, sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then come the pulses and oil and vegetables. तो उसके बाद आता है. Okay.
Right.
So as a result, now what's happening is the as our population starts to prosper and it, as it should, what do you think the first of the things that a mother is going to try and feed her children is going to be fresh vegetables and fruits as soon as she can afford it, and
Right.
to an extent possible if they're non-vegetarian they will have meat, otherwise they will have dal. Okay.
Right.
So just as and you can import dal, yes, you can import oil, but you cannot keep importing tomatoes and onions.
Right.
And this spike which is happening now, in you will see if you see the history last 4 to 5 years, every year this cycle has started of onion and tomato prices going out of control. This will get worse.
Mm.
It will not get better because as the country prospers, first thing that mother is going to do is buy onion and tomato,
Right.
and that is why this is happening. There is no there has to be a concerted effort on two fronts. One is expanding in an organized manner, not in a chaotic manner, but in an organized manner. The production of vegetables has to be focused on in terms of which it is not. Vegetable production is a very localized subject, and it's also the government is struggling to control supply, as in ensure that there's enough supply so that the prices stay down. The second part to solve it is to encourage the processed food industry, because which is what the Western world did. What they did is addressed it through the second part, which is there's such a huge processed food industry that you have a alternate supply of these vegetables through processed form, and therefore you're not dependent on fresh.
Right.
So we are stuck in this loop, and it will have to get addressed. Otherwise, you can take it from me that every single year between post monsoon till the winter crop starts to come, the prices of onion and tomato will keep shooting up. They will not go down.
Right.
Uh, so that's one key issue of inflation which has to get addressed. Number one. Having said that, therefore, now it comes to your second side, which is the so-called health issues. So I think in India, therefore, and this is my take on this, what ended up happening is also through the from the 70s through to the early 2000s, the government taxed the process industry in a processed food industry in an adverse way. So anything which was processed food, be it in cans or in bottles or in a pouch, was very heavily taxed and continues to be heavily taxed. Whereas it should be the opposite. Only by reducing the tax will you encourage the consumption of canned, bottled, and packaged food, and which will keep the inflation down. Okay, there is no other way to supply you so much. इतना fresh प्याज टमाटर आपको आ ही नहीं सकता है कैसे, unless you buy a processed form of onion and tomato, and the
Right.
people have to be encouraged. So one is the farming, second is the tax laws have been so as a result the Indian processed food industry, the biggest of the players in Indian processed food industry are all predominantly players who are in the chocolate and biscuits and snack foods. Why? Because of this reason.
Mm.
So they've fulfilled that discretionary food need, but not the staple. Nobody in India, there is, you tell me the biggest company that produces a meal, Indian meal, that you will not even be able to name one.
Right.
The biggest tomato use you will see is in ketchup, which
Right.
is also loaded with sugar.
Right.
So we've ended up with this adverse development of the food industry, which is addressing foods which are frankly not the healthiest foods. That is the background of this whole thing. The healthy food of a meal which would be healthier is not been developed in India.
So that's very fascinating insight, Ajay. I mean, if you think of it, you're saying that because of the high taxation on processed food, what
Historically,
you have is really proliferation of the discretionary food in that sense,
yes,
right? Your snacking and
correct,
everything, and therefore we link a lot towards that. Saying that processed
yes,
food is bad.
correct,
Fact of the matter is, if there was encouragement, you could actually have staple diet, like let's say
correct,
for example, actual meals available at much lower cost,
correct.
guaranteed food security, and curbing
Yes,
inflation.
yes.
I think that's a great point. And so have you been engaged with the policymakers on this? Has there been any movement from the industry to engage, because you're right. I mean, the average American doesn't necessarily need to open his fridge. I mean, he doesn't need to really open his what should I say, cupboard to pull out the vegetables to make the food, right? I mean, that's what happens in India. For him,
Yes,
it's about opening the fridge and just baking
correct.
it or whatever, microwaving it, right?
Yep.
And so what's your thought on that? I mean, do you think there's any anybody in the policy making position is thinking about this?
I'm sure there are people. I would not remotely think that they are not thinking about it. For sure, the problem is that somewhere in our, and I think the intention is definitely there. The whole issue, see, in India also many things are, as you know, we are a complicated country, and
We are complicated,
yeah.
yeah.
So there is the Ministry of Agriculture is independent. The Ministry of Food Processing is independent. Then the guys who sit and control inflation as Ministry of Finance, ये सब compartmentalize हो गया है. I think
Just getting them to talk and see eye
yes.
to eye.
I'm sure. So people are thinking about it, and are. But this is something which, and I'm no economist and no expert, but I'm telling you, मैं लिख के देता हूँ आपको, the tomato and onion prices will not go down at all. In every year this cycle will happen, and it will only get worse. 200 रुपया होने वाला है. They forget about 50 rupees and 60 rupees.
Wow.
It will become 200 rupees if this thing doesn't. So you have to address this issue also at the farm level, like I told you, and at the processed food industry. It's not just about the processed food industry. So I'm not trying to grind my own axe. We have to also address at the farm level by encouraging farming of these crops in a much more.
No, I think there's no harm in grinding your own axe. I think ultimately it's about multiple stakeholders listening to each other
together,
and
yes.
coming to a common ground, right? In that sense.
Yes. So
and
today,
really,
sorry,
having a very
today the one guys who have solved this problem have been, for instance, so it's not that it's not solvable, but today who has solved this is guys who make tomato ketchup and people who make potato chips.
Right.
They have a huge backward integration program.
They've
Yes.
secured their supplies.
Correct.
You talked about, of course, we're talking about ketchup and talking about the sugar, and sugar has become the new smoking, right? In 2020s right now. I mean, people have suddenly become very aware and conscious of it, and really the ramifications. I mean, I was in Singapore just last week, and to kind of see all these labels on the food now, with a very clear, distinct A, B, C, D. You see that on packed food. You see that even in a Starbucks, very clearly the moment that and you can know that when you're ordering that lovely frappuccino with extra caramel and extra shot, that's a C or a D. You should be having it, or at least be aware, right?
Correct.
What is your take on that? Do you think there should be a little more activism? In fact, there've been a lot of activism by people like Prashant Desai and Raymond. They've really been very active bloggers trying to. But that, of course, is something that we are doing at our level.
Sure.
But any candid thoughts from your side? What should be done?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely see the even in business, I keep telling my own team that to make a change, you have to jolt the system into, you have to shock the system. Without that, chalta hi rahega. Human beings are like that, and definitely Indian human beings all the more so. We are always in a relaxed space, in that sense. Climate is good, always go. So khana acha hai, ye hai, maa hai, bhagwan hai, aur kya chahiye duniya mein, So I think. So to your point, why to an extent now, what version of it is needed? That's one has to be a little bit more practical, but the definitely awareness needs to get created because so people should be a lot more aware of what they are consuming and what is the cost of that. Now having so yes, I think this has to be a balanced act. There has to be an awareness, but not to an awareness where you end up killing the industry. That makes no sense to me. I think.
Right.
That is not logical, but at the same time also other steps have to be taken to facilitate alternate consumption and so on. But finally, in India, one has to be, so our take is on this issue is also 2-3 other things is finally in India, because we eat the best food in the world. Always the taste is the number one factor. There is, I can guarantee you can talk to any multinational, QSR, snack food company, kisi ko bhi baat karo, the first thing, it has to taste great.
Right.
Even the poorest person in India, he or she eats less hygienic food, but great tasting food.
Right.
Even if you eat food on the street, it tastes great, it may not be hygienic.
Right.
So in India, you will not succeed selling health.
The street food is, it's just tasty, right? Nobody looks at the health and the hygiene at all, right, out there.
Correct. But I think that so in India, the to my point, therefore, one is you have to therefore do this, ensure that the taste is great, and only. So when you look at the population, our read is that if you look at people who are above 30 or 35 years of age, and this is just a broad matrix I'm talking about, typically will be doing health more out of compulsion
Mm.
and not out of
Living choice.
necessity. I mean, not out of a choice rather.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the younger people, if you tell me below 30, 35, there's I would say they are not only doing it out of compulsion, but realizing that it's better to eat healthier. So you will see things like yoga bars and protein bars and so on and so forth. If you're above 30, 35 years of age, you're unlikely to go and you'll probably happily buy a Cadbury's Dairy Milk or a Snickers bar and just chew that up. But somebody
Yeah.
who's below 30 years of age is more likely to go towards a yoga bar or a protein bar. So I think that there is no one India and there is no one Indian palate.
Right.
And but our take is that there is the younger population is slightly different in that sense. But having
Yeah.
said that, finally, yes, and they also drink a lot of protein shakes and eat
Yeah.
protein bars and so on, where they are willing to compromise the taste to an extent more than people who are a little bit older who are now stuck in their habits. So
Right.
older guys will only do it because they are forced to. Younger
Yeah.
people do it out of choice.
I think we had more fun. I mean, if you look at them out here, they don't touch sugar. They will not
Yeah,
have tea. I mean, I'm like,
फिर
what are
मजाक
you
कहाँ पे
living for?
है?
That's true.
Yeah,
So I think this has been really fantastic. And I think before we come to a close, it's been close to an hour. There's just a few questions that's been put together by team, again by my young team, and I'm just going to shoot them at you and just give your instant reaction to that, right?
sure.
So, what's your favorite cuisine?
South Indian.
What on that? Dosa, idli, which part?
I would say not just dosa, idli, but also traditional Kerala food. Be it
Of course.
yes,
Yeah.
there's so much actually people in India have not appreciated.
We are spoiled. We're spoiled for
Yes,
choice.
correct, correct.
Street eat or fine dining?
I would say I think it's a combination of the two. There is not a because the street eat has you can't get street eat food on fine dining, unfortunately, but you also
Right.
can't get some of the fine dining techniques on a street. So
Right.
I think you need this and that, and not this or that. Yeah.
Right. If you had to take a favorite historical person out for lunch, who would that be?
Okay, out for lunch is a slightly the if I had to meet a historic person, I would have said Adi Shankaracharya would be somebody I would want to meet
Yeah.
because you would like be blown into a different world now. Taking them out to eat, okay, that's a different.
No, but I got your answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Which global company do you admire the most?
I would say in
Cisco.
terms, so typically, since I'm also from the food industry, I would definitely say McDonald's, Yum have tremendous things to McDonald's and Yum. I would also say like a Coke, whether you like it or not. Yes, they may be giving bad food, bad for you.
I
This
love
thing.
my Coke Zero, so
Yes, there you go.
I
But having said that, I would also say, frankly, a company like Haldiram is also, to me, is golden. I keep telling the owners of Haldiram, your name is gold, because the
yeah,
quality is so good.
right,
And I also admire them because their ethos of quality is fantastic. So,
right. And if you had to bring one global food trend to India, what would that be?
I think the trend of health is making it more mainstream
Right,
is really needs to come. Yeah.
right. I think this was fantastic. I mean, I didn't even realize how the time flew. I mean, any parting thoughts? I mean, what's the kind of legacy that you want to leave behind, for the food industry?
I think that the key thing I would say is the key legacy I would want to leave behind is that carrying all the stakeholders with you, which is the only way to succeed in the food industry. The consumer, of course, has to benefit. The farmer needs to benefit,
Right,
and of course, then the investors need to. Then the magic will happen. This is an industry where you can't do things by yourself. It's impossible,
right.
and that would be the legacy to leave behind. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure they're going to be giants standing, on top of the shoulders of, FSI, because I think that's how you will probably have these QSRs and the new restaurants really building out scale, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
No, thank you so much, Ajay. It was really a delight and a pleasure, just not only understanding about your business, but understanding about your worldview, about the industry, about the trends. Thank you so much for taking out the time.
Thank you, Vivek. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.